We saw several state-ranked teams lose this past weekend in the likes of China Spring, Crawford, and Bremond, but of course they weren't exactly playing nobodies. Do you think that these teams will still have the stuff to make a deep playoff run, later this year? What do you say?
Well, Crawford is young. I think a lot of the sports at Crawford, softball has been able to withstand this, but a lot of the sports at Crawford tend to cycle. They'll have, a young team, and they'll have a really good team, and then they'll have a young team again. It's going to happen in 2A, right? You're not just going to have class after class after class. And so I think probably there's a lot of room for growth there. And Crawford being Crawford, you can get to the postseason, and if your team is grown enough, you can really, make that move at the right time. So I think there's potential, but I wouldn't put a big bet on it at this point.
Let me say this about Crawford. I was at Crawford Arena volleyball last night, and a Crawford parent that I know came over and sat down next to me and was talking to me for a little bit. Friend of mine from way back. And we were just talking about this and that, and he's got a kid on the football team. And he said, yeah, they're not football, they're not going to be as good this year. And he goes, they'll still win district, but so that's funny that, the standard is such at Crawford that, not making the state semifinals could be like a little bit of a quote unquote down year. Yeah.
I think, but there's two sides of that. Because, okay, you have to be at the point at Crawford where you want to break through that regional final, state semifinal, and get back to the state championship and win it, right? And that's what drives those kind of expectations, is the feeling that one of these days you're going to break through. But DJ, I'm going to get out of the way. I keep talking over you.
No, I think y'all are right. Crawford is pretty young. They lost, a lot of the guys last year that were producing were seniors.
Brett Chambers, Luke Torbert. Yeah, they had some hosses.
They had some really tall, really big country boys out there. And I think they'll make a deep playoff run. Whether they make it past state will remain to be seen. They're young, and it's 2A. So, but yeah, and then not to mention that Centerville was just a really good team. Mm-hmm. And I think they've only gotten better from last year when they played Mart to the wire, only lost by a point. And so I think they're coming back a little more dominant this year. And, that's all you can really say. Those little 2A schools, they're going to have some really tough teams that are going to play both sides of the ball. And, and I liked at least that for Crawford is that they didn't stop fighting. In the second half, they really came back, and especially their defense, they really came back and tried to hold Centerville. So I think that's at least a bright side of that game.
How about the other C team with the uniforms that we like so much, China Spring? What do y'all think on that? Chad, you saw that game against Melissa. What was your takeaway of China Spring?
Well, they did the thing wrong that they did right the week before. They gave up turnovers and gave up possessions and got in a hole instead of building a lead like they had against Lorena. And Melissa was too good for them to be able to do that, obviously, and then they hung with them. It was pretty much an even game from, that point forward. Melissa got up 28-0 and then ended up winning by 30 points. There's some things that China Spring has to get back to a certain level where they were the last 2 years. I think probably Offensive line play, just as evidenced by the fact that Kyle Barton isn't turning out yards the way he was last year, even in the Lorena game, not so much. And then I don't know that they really. I mean, they've got some good receivers making plays, but that was one place where they were really like maybe a little bit under the radar, really, really good last year. Was having like big, strong receivers everywhere.
Yeah, Trey Hafford. I mean, that's not a guy that grows on trees. So,
Right.
What do you say, DJ, about China Spring? You wrote about them in your Rewind column as well.
Yeah, I mean, talking to BD before the game, he was just talking about they would have had to play perfect football, which is kind of impossible, for anybody to play perfect football. I mean, even I'm as dominant as Melissa was, I'm sure they had little mistakes here or there. Those guys just came back, bigger, more experienced. And China Spring has a lot of young guys. They had 25 first-year varsity players to start off the season. And like Chad said, the O-line might have some growing to do. I still think, like with Crawford, I still think that it has something to say that, they were still trying to win it even in the fourth quarter. And then
still playing hard to the end.
Still playing hard. And then you've got Cash McCollum that kind of just carried the team during this game. And that's a guy that you only see every once in a while. I just probably in the big picture of the season, they're going to look back at this game as maybe a bit of a turning point, maybe a bit of a boost. And I think that next week is going to say a lot about them and how they respond, because they're playing Mejia, which is a team that they clearly have an advantage over. And if they have the same mistakes in that game that they've had in the past two games, then that's something that they'll really have to reevaluate. But yeah, I mean, we get so used to the standard that these teams set, and then when they do lose, it's just like, where did it go wrong? And it's just like, this is not the China Spring of 2022 that kind of got it through the season and got, had a lot of those close wins. And it's definitely not the China Spring of 2021 that kind of breezed through the season, right? So I still think they have a chance to get that third title. But, they're going to have to work at it a little bit more in some of those areas that they lost a lot of production in. And
sure. Yeah. I mean, I think you mentioned it, 25 first-time varsity players. That's a lot. And as Chad said, I think some of those probably are on the O-line. They had some seniors there last year. So as Coach Beatty and that staff gets that group more experience, as they sort of coalesce, I agree with y'all. I think they should be playing in December and, making another run at Jerry World. So, yeah, I mean, there's no shame in losing to the number one team in 5A,
Right.
So
it always stings a little to get thumped at home.
Yes, it does. It does. Fair enough.